The head of the task force in charge of collecting dead bodies in Ecuador has pointed to a discrepancy in the official COVID-19 death toll. For the second consecutive day, the coronavirus death toll hit a new high in the United States. The World Bank has forecast that Sub-Saharan Africa will go into recession this year due to the coronavirus pandemic, sparking a food crisis. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Katrina Goss. The head of the task force in charge of collecting dead bodies in Ecuador, Jorge Huarted, highlighted that the number of fatalities in the province of Guayas continues to rise, pointing to a discrepancy in the official COVID-19 death toll. Speaking during a video conference, the official confirmed that in the past 2 weeks there was an exponential rise in the number of deceased and that the competent agencies need to properly investigate whether the increase is purely a result of COVID-19 deaths or other causes. Guayas province, and specifically its city of Guayaquil, is the epicenter of the coronavirus epidemic in Ecuador.
In the
figures that we have managed to cross-reference with the work of the Ministry of Government, the Civil Registry, our government team, we have approximately 6,703 fatalities reported within these 15 days of April in the province of Guayas. The usual average of monthly deaths in Guayas is approximately 2,000 people. Obviously, after 15 days, we have a difference of approximately 5,700. Beyond the figures involving different causes, COVID, presumed COVID, natural causes.
President of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, celebrated the 17th anniversary of the Inside the Neighborhood medical mission this Thursday. He also reported that the country had registered 7 new coronavirus cases in the last 24 hours, bringing the total to 204.
First of all, we took measures on time. The lockdown in a bold, timely way, quickly and consciously, willingly. Fortunately, in Venezuela there has not been a curfew, because it has been voluntary, responsibly. 85% compliance. The average compliance over these 32 days, today, marks 32 days with 85% compliance. Thanks to you, families of Venezuela, to you, beloved compatriots, women, men, children, to our older people, to all of you. Now, the second major key was the Inside the Neighborhood mission, having the doctors trained in community visits, in the door-to-door visits, and in the personalized care for the people, the family, a key, the power popular.
Argentinian President Alberto Fernandez announced that his government will seek to renegotiate the country's debt in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic.
I also want to tell you that together with Cristina, Martin, with the entire government, we proposed a course of action to ask the International Monetary Fund to come and see what happened in Argentina, and that the International Monetary Fund audits the reality of the Argentinian economy. And that is how the IMF said at some point that Argentina's debt was unsustainable. Then he spoke of what the private bonds maturity terms must be like for Argentina to have a sustainable debt. A sustainable debt for us is a debt that does not hold Argentina back, a debt that we can pay off without deferring Argentina's needs, which it had done in December and have increased after the debacle caused by the pandemic.
And the Argentinian president also thanked provincial governors for their joint efforts to combat COVID-19.
I want to thank the head of the government of the city of Buenos Aires, the governor of Jujuy, the governor of Corrientes, the opposition governors, our own governors, for always supporting us, for always being on our side. But I want us to understand that we are taking a very important step for Argentina, which has to do with how we want to build the Argentina of the future.
After heated clashes with the Brazilian president last month over his approach to the coronavirus, some state governors have since backed down, wary of losing vital federal aid. On Wednesday, however, the governor of Sao Paulo state, João Doria, openly criticised President Bolsonaro. Sao Paulo has reported 11,000 COVID-19 cases and almost 800 deaths, the highest number in the country.
In addition to the virus and the economic problems, we have also to face wrong positions and sometimes irresponsible positions, attitudes from the president of the country, going against his own Minister of Health, the Minister of Health, and the recommendations of the World Health Council. So it's a number of things we face, maybe more than what other countries where their prime ministers and presidents took the right position. Some of them late, but they recognized that they made a mistake and late took the right positions. But here we have to face the president of the country and protect the population.
More than 3,700 coronavirus cases have been reported across the Caribbean region. Our correspondent in the Dominican Republic, Daisy Toussaint, brings us a summary of the situation in the islands of the Greater Antilles.
Hello, greetings to you in the studio and all our viewers. Yes, we have the latest developments on COVID-19 in the islands of the Greater Antilles. In the Dominican Republic, the total number of confirmed cases has risen to 3,755 and the death toll to 196, and 215 people have recovered. The Minister of Public Health informed today that the institution ordered the mandatory use of face masks in the country for all citizens who circulate in public spaces and workplaces until more restrictive measures are adopted. In Haiti, a country sharing the same island with the Dominican Republic, 41 confirmed cases and 1 fatality were registered up until yesterday. In Puerto Rico, the Death Department confirmed the number of COVID-19 cases increased to 1,043, of which 56 have died. Yesterday, people banned pots and pans as a form of protest against the government of Wanda Vasquez, which has been caught up in scandals over alleged acts of corruption committed in recent days in the midst of the pandemic. In Jamaica, the official figures present 125 confirmed cases, of which 21 have recovered and 5 have passed away. Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, requested an investigation into a COVID-19 outbreak registered at a call center in St. Catherine, where 32 workers tested positive in 24 hours. Holness said that if the investigation proves that a crime was committed by those responsible for the company, where around 800 people work, the police will press charges. It is all the information we have for the moment. Back to you in the studio.
Over 6,000 residents of La Paz neighborhood in the Colombian capital Bogotá's Ciudad Bolívar district are silently protesting the government's lack of assistance in the midst of the coronavirus epidemic. For several days now, La Paz residents have been waiting for aid to mitigate their economic situation in the midst of the lockdown, as announced by the national government. They have organised to hang red pieces of cloth from their homes to signal their call for help to the authorities. Colombia has confirmed over 3,000 COVID-19 cases and 131 fatalities, while almost 500 patients have recovered from the virus. April 16th marks 59 years since Fidel Castro declared the socialist character of the Cuban Revolution. A revolution of the humble, with the humble and for the humble, as he said back then.
Fidel Castro declared the socialist character of the Cuban Revolution during the funeral honors for the victims of bombing raids in different parts of the country. This immoral action saw 8 mercenary warplanes enter Cuban airspace, camouflaged with false insignia, with the aim of destroying the modest Cuban Air Force on the ground and reducing its combat capability. Before an outraged crowd willing to defend their right to chart their own destiny, Fidel said,
"What the imperialists cannot forgive us for is that we are already here under their noses, and that we have made a socialist revolution right under the United States' very nose, and that we will defend this socialist revolution with this rifle."
The air raid was the prelude to the Bay of Pigs invasion on April 17, 1961, which ended up being the first imperialist defeat in Latin America. thanks to the joint action of the rebel army and the people through the National Revolutionary Militias. According to Fidel, the proclamation of the socialist character of the Cuban Revolution was made right at the start of the U.S. aggression, at a time when it was critical to uphold the revolutionary flag to the utmost extent.
More stories coming up after this very short break, so don't go away. From the south. For the second consecutive day, the coronavirus death toll hit a new high in the United States. According to the latest data from Johns Hopkins University, the United States reached a new record of almost 2,600 COVID-19 related deaths over the last 24 hours, representing its worst daily toll ever. The US has now seen almost 34,000 COVID-19 fatalities. The figures were announced after President Donald Trump claimed the US had passed the peak of new coronavirus cases. Over 667,000 cases have been reported in the US so far. The Director General of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, has responded to Donald Trump's halting of US funding in the midst of the novel coronavirus pandemic.
We regret the decision of the President of the United States to order a halt in funding to the World Health Organization. With support from the people and government of the United States, WHO works to improve the health of many of the world's poorest and most vulnerable people.
As COVID-19 testing increases across Spain, it is expected that the number of cases will rise as asymptomatic carriers are also identified. However, the hopes are that the process will help detect more potential patients.
Even as the evolution and trend continue to stabilize or even lessen, we have to still regret 551 new deceased people because of coronavirus in Spanish regions yesterday. Today we have a total of 5,183 new cases. In total, we have identified since the beginning of the epidemic 182,816 cases in Spain.
Russia's two largest cities of Moscow and St. Petersburg have become ghost towns as local authorities enact measures to stop the spread of the novel coronavirus. Moscow on Wednesday launched a system of mandatory digital lockdown passes for residents seeking to travel through the city by car or public transport. Meanwhile, in St. Petersburg, which has about 16 times less coronavirus cases than Moscow, the measures have largely entailed voluntary self-isolation recommendations, but the vast majority of residents have opted to stay home. Russia has reported almost 28,000 cases of the novel coronavirus and 232 fatalities. China has successfully contained the COVID-19 outbreak, but is now struggling with a new wave of cases, mainly consisting of Chinese nationals returning to the country from abroad. On Thursday, China reported 34 imported cases from overseas, as well as 12 domestic cases, following the same pattern of recent days. Meanwhile, workers in protective suits inspect passengers returning from Wuhan at Beijing train station, as the Chinese capital tries to counter the threat of a second wave of coronavirus infections from other regions of the country. Beijing authorities have imposed a strict 14-day quarantine on people arriving from other parts of China, regardless of whether they test negative for COVID-19, a measure not yet adopted in other cities. Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, announced that restrictions imposed during a strict 4-week lockdown could be eased next week, as the number of new daily cases has dropped significantly over the past 11 days. Under Ardern's plan, primary schools would reopen, but attendance would be voluntary, and some businesses could reopen, including drive-through and delivery restaurants. New Zealand has reported over 1,400 cases of COVID-19 and 9 deaths.
We will step down to level 3 in a way that is consistent with our goal to eliminate COVID-19 in New Zealand. The last thing we want to do when moving levels is give away the gains that we have won in lockdown. So that means that we will be considering seriously all of the data and information that we present daily to you as a cabinet when we come to make that decision. Public-facing bars, restaurants and cafes remain closed, and so do malls and retail stores. But unlike level 4, food delivery, drive-through, online shopping, or options like click and collect shopping can begin.
And we're taking one last break now, but stay with us for more. Welcome back to From the South. The World Bank has forecast that Sub-Saharan Africa will go into recession this year due to the coronavirus pandemic. Albert Sufak, the World Bank's chief economist for Africa, offered an alarming assessment on Thursday, noting that conservative estimates are for a minus 2.1% contraction of GDP, though it is possible that the real figure could reach minus 5.1%, which will plunge Sub-Saharan Africa into its worst recession in 25 years. The economist stressed that these are unprecedented times as the world faces its deepest recession since World War II, which could generate a significant food crisis in Africa.
Despite a late arrival on the continent, COVID-19 is already taking a toll on African economies. And as a result, we are now projecting that economic growth in Sub-Saharan Africa will decline from 2.4% in 2019 to a negative minus 2.1%, and that could actually degrade to minus 5.1% depending on the gravity of this crisis.
The African continent has surpassed 17,200 confirmed cases of the novel coronavirus, according to the African Union. According to the regional organisation, over 3,500 patients have recovered from the virus, while the death toll has risen to 910. Most patients are located in the northern region of the continent, while Central Africa remains the least affected area. The African Union is made up of 55 states, and COVID-19 cases have been reported in 52 of them. Only 3 member states, Lesotho, Western Sahara and Comoros, have not registered any cases of the coronavirus. And a team of Chinese medical experts left for Burkina Faso on Thursday to aid the African state in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Invited by the government of Burkina Faso, the 12-member team departed in the early morning from North China's Tianjin municipality. Experts of the city's Disease Control and Prevention Center are also part of the medical team. A broad representation of Syrian civil society organisations continue to call for the lifting of the US sanctions against the country, particularly in the midst of the novel coronavirus pandemic. Intellectuals, artists, religious representatives and professionals of different sectors have joined the campaign highlighting the war imposed and the blockade of Syria. Father Elias Salawi, founder of the Al-Farah Choir, is among the leading voices of the campaign and has called for support from all Eastern churches to condemn the unilateral sanctions against his nation. Iraqi Prime Minister Adil Abdul Mahdi confirmed on Wednesday that US troops had pulled out of 6 military bases around the country. The Prime Minister explained that the US troops would be redeployed to 3 other bases, now holding the rest of the occupying forces in Iraq. According to some analysts, these movements and the announcement of an eventual withdrawal of US troops are but a distraction to consolidate the US occupation of Iraq, as they could be making preparations to attack positions of the Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces. It's worth recalling that on January 5th, the Iraqi parliament voted for the withdrawal of US troops from the country, whose presence is rejected by the majority of the Iraqi population. And we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss and thank you for watching.